Welcome to this podcast 2 from Advanced Leadership. My name is David Robertson and I'm passionate about helping people to see their leadership increase in effectiveness, increase in focus, increase in impact and increase in multiplication. In the first podcast in the series, we began to think about mindset. If you haven't watched it yet, can I encourage you to cut here, go and watch that one first, and then we'll continue with this part 2. Welcome. In part 1 of this podcast series, I introduced the idea that transforming behaviour begins with the renewing of one's mind, one's mindset. I want to encourage you to positively to find input that can reprogram your thinking about yourselves or about others, about you as a team. If you're considering this as a team of people, can you kind of think through what input can we have that can reprogram our thinking in this? What are the alternative positive voices that you can invite into your life, into your mind, into your heart, into who you are, which are going to override the negative voices that you've identified? As a Christian, we have got an advance on this. Christians, we have the Christian Holy Book, the Bible, which is full of the promises of God towards his people. It describes in the Bible how God sees us. And when we start to think about how our Father God sees us and, as it were, speaks to us through his written word of the Bible, we can see how that can start to reprogram our thinking about things. And let me just give you a very practical few examples. In the links below, I'm going to put a link to a really great little free book that I think it's from the Navigators, which is something like 300 promises from the Bible that you can believe. Now, what I suggest to leaders that I coach is that, so for example, let's take a scenario. You are in a situation where your prevailing mindset is, I don't feel loved. I feel as if I'm a failure and I can't do anything to fix that. Well, what I encourage you to do is to look through these promises from the Bible. So, for example, there are promises there which says, God knew you before you were born. He formed you in your mother's womb, and thus he loves you. It speaks in the New Testament of the Christian Bible, another promise of God, that it's this is what love is, not that we loved God, but that he first loved us. And so you get loads of these kind of promises. And what I suggest to the people I coach is that you find maybe a dozen of those verses which speak to what you know to be this deficit in your mindset and in your thinking. And then to take those as a prescription, and again, this might sound a little weird, but it definitely works, is when you find those verses that are helpful, actually every morning take half a dozen of them like a prescription and read them out loud. Look to yourself in the mirror and read them out loud so that you start to form. So for me, I guess you can do this digitally, but I have a little folder here. So for example, I found verses in the Bible which I find helpful. Excuse me. I'll show you a couple, and you can see how these start to shape the way that I'm going to think about the day as I go into it. So for example, in Luke 21, it says, make up your mind not to worry. Beforehand, how you will defend yourself. That's when people are being critical. For I will give you words and wisdom that none of your adversaries will be able to resist or contradict. In other words, you can go into the day confident that if you're not going to be too worried about stuff, God is going to come with you. He's going to be there for you. Think about the things of heaven, not on the things of earth. So my prevailing mindset at one time was to be kind of worrying about the things that I've got to do all day today. But think about the things of heaven, not the things of earth. For you died to this life, says this verse, and your real life is hidden with Christ in God. And I could go on. So I've got loads of these little verses which I read to help as a prescription to program my mind to recognize the fact that my Father God loves me, and whether I perform well or not in this day, he still loves me. I program my mind not to worry. My natural kind of position is to overthink things, and so I use those verses to remind me not to be worried about today, says Jesus, because not to worry about tomorrow, because today's got enough worries of its own. Just focus on today. So if you're a Christian, I want to encourage you to find verses like that and to speak them into your life. Read them over to yourself as ways of encouraging. If you're doing this, watching this advanced webcast as a group, maybe you could share with each other some positive verses or words or quotes that you'll find helpful in this season. So that's your task for this month. Find yourself positive quotes, pictures, if you're a picture-oriented, visual-orientated kind of person, different verses and so on that are going to speak to your heart's condition. So thank you so much for being with me on this podcast. If you found this helpful, I'd be really encouraged if you would subscribe below. If you would also share on your social media and bring others into this conversation. If you have any ideas of how themes that we can talk about, then please share them in the comments below, and I'll be happy to think about including them in future podcasts. Next time, we're going to talk about habits and how helpful habits can overcome bad habits, and how having habits in our life that stack up are going to bring us to a place of increase in our leadership. Thank you for watching. Until next time.